Let me tell you a story. What you're going to see in this video is me taking a story. It's a very short story. This story is from the Ashanti of West Africa. However, I'm going to tell it in 3 ways. The central character in this story is Anansi the spider. Is Anansi the spider. Is Anansi the spider. In the storytelling lingo, we call it the storytelling bubble. How big do you want the storytelling bubble to be? Anybody who's a storyteller who tells in different venues is going to use the bubbles. Big bubble story is just when you go for it. You are being as big as you can be. He looked left and he looked right and he looked everywhere. When you send your child to bed, that's a small bubble story. Tree, a tall tree. Small bubble, medium bubble, and big bubble. And you can determine as a storyteller where on that range do you want to tell your stories. Okay.
Okay.
This is a story from West Africa, from the Ashanti people of Ghana. Anansi the spider looked into the big black pot. In the pot was all of the wisdom of the world. Nyame, the sky god, had given the wisdom to Anansi and told him to share it with everyone. Anansi looked inside and he found instructions on how to do basket weaving, instructions on how to make furniture, instructions for growing food and making food. And Anansi thought to himself, all of this wisdom, I can't share it with anybody. I want it all for myself. But Anansi thought, if I'm going to have this wisdom for myself, I need to put it somewhere where nobody can find it. And so Anansi looked around the village and he looked, and he noticed a tall tree. And Anansi said, that's the place I'm going to take it. A tall, tall, tall tree. And he thought, that's it. I'm going to take this pot and I'm going to climb up the tree and tie it to the top. And so Anansi grabbed the pot with his 4 legs, and with his other 4 legs, he began to climb the tree. But this was very, very, very hard for him to do because he only had half of his climbing hands. And as he was huffing and puffing and trying to climb, his son, Inkituma, who was on the bottom, looked up at him and said, Father, if you take the pot, tie it to your back, you will have all of your hands and legs, and you'll be able to climb much easier. And Anansi looked down and in a fit of rage said, how can you tell me how to... Anansi was furious. How can you give me instructions on how to climb the tree? Don't you know that I am the wisest person? I have all of the wisdom of the world in this pot. And you are a child. You do not know anything. You cannot tell me how to climb this tree. Just stand there and watch. As Anansi told this to his son in rage, his hand let go of the pot, and the pot fell. When it fell and hit the ground, wisdom flew everywhere. Raven, who was flying by, picked up some wisdom. The lion that was walking in the forest picked up some wisdom. The rabbits and the mice that were in the grass picked up some wisdom. The children who were playing picked up some wisdom, and the women and the men all picked up some wisdom. And from that day, when men and women shared ideas, when children shared ideas as they played, when the animals in the forest shared ideas, they were sharing wisdom. Wisdom was not in the hands of only one person. Wisdom was shared with everybody. 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 I am originally from Malawi in Central Africa. My grandmother was a prolific storyteller. I was looking up at him saying, she was the one who really instilled in me the love of storytelling. Even said, Father, if the stories that we would get from my dad was usually around report card time. I was not by any stretch of the imagination an A-B student. I was more a B-C student, sometimes dipping into the D's. So around report card time is when we'd hear stories from my dad, mostly in order to get us to work harder. Don't you know that I have all... My grandmother, even in her old age, she would move and she would dance, and we were just thrilled as kids. When I tell kids in the United States that I grew up without television, that I first saw television when they're 25, their first question is, what did you do? We listened to stories. We danced. We told each other stories. We would go into the forest and make up whole villages and create whole villages and whole scenarios just out of our own heads. So we had our own quote-unquote TV shows, but they were in the forest, on the grass, on the beach, while waiting for the fishermen to come in with the fish. There is actually a saying, a person with whom you have shared a story, you cannot injure, maim, or kill. Now, that's not a 100% proof rule, but by and large, when you know somebody's story, it is much harder to do harm to them. And I think for that particular reason, storytelling is important.